It is an honor and a pleasure to be moderating or in discussion. Let me please introduce Vidya Shah, writer and musician. Vidya is a musician and writer from New Delhi, India. She was initially trained in Carnatic music and later received guidance in the North Indian genres of Khyal from Shubha, you'll excuse my pronunciation occasionally, Mugdal and Mujahid Hussain Khan, Thumri Dadra, and Ghazal from Shanti Hiranand. She has performed both nationally and internationally, including at the Tansen Samora in Gwalior, the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and the Asia Society in New York. A popular performer and a prolific composer, she is the recipient of the Charles Wallace Award and a senior fellowship from the Government of India for her project Women on Record, a performance highlighting the contributions of the forgotten women performers in the gramophone era. She also writes and speaks on music and is the author of Jalsa, Indian Women's Journey from the Salon to the Studio. Amazing document, first in this area. Not here, unfortunately, lost in transit, but available through Columbia University Press in the US. Do not buy from Amazon, right? Okay. I'm sorry, I'm holding the wrong side. So we can't do the autographs of the book today because we don't have them on site. But let me just switch over to a different place in the iPad. Speaking of a session yesterday, we were dealing with technologies. Again, welcome. And I guess just to ask first and to open up our session, if you could tell us a little bit about how your interest evolved in this area.
Thank you, Jeffrey. And thank you all for being here. This has been a 7-8 year journey now for me and has become an obsessive one over time. The one thing that I always feel when I'm introduced before a discussion on women in the gramophone era, I feel silly because I feel these women were such divas of their time and they brought so much to the world of music that I feel honored and privileged that I was led onto this path, actually. And some years ago, when I was performing, there was a collector in the audience who came and gave me cassettes, tapes, and said, you might want to listen to this. So I went back home and I played it on my tape recorder, and it was garbled, scratchy music. It's not that I was not familiar with the idea of gramophone music, but when I heard the repertoire on those tapes, I was taken aback with how much it was completely what I have been learning in the highly exalted oral tradition of Indian music. And that's what really drew me to know who they were and where they came from and what their journeys were. Because I realized that although we are an oral tradition, the gramophone era was a very, very important slice of documenting this oral tradition. And a lot of these women only ended up being names in discographies. There was very little record of them. And so the idea of women on record. It's about the women on the record, but it's also about women of whom we have no record or very little record. That's how the project came into place. And just to add one more thing about, it was typical of women to announce their names at the end of the 78 RPMs, as some of you are perhaps familiar with. These were done for reasons, of course, the fact that often recording engineers didn't know who the hell they were. So just to make sure that they get the name right, they would announce their names. And I feel actually in a very sort of a default way, it was perhaps a copyright thing as well. Hey, this is my singing. So it was interesting for me to see how their names were announced. And every artist had a peculiar, different way of announcing her name. And that was also a reflection of her status, Perhaps, I mean, these are speculations. I mean, there's no source to these things. But the way the name was announced carried with it an attitude, carried with it a sense of power, or otherwise. So it was interesting to sort of, get into this phenomenon and try to uncover it. And finally, to that question, I'd like to say that as a woman, I feel very privileged to be able to sing a lot of that repertoire, because for them it came with a lot of social baggage, which perhaps I did not have to deal so much with, or do not have to deal so much with.
And we'll come back to some of those questions later. There's two things I would love to just help us maybe start with. Does everyone, again, I don't know age, background of audience, know what a gramophone recording is, those old 78s? Do we need to talk about that a little bit? A couple words maybe just to give background of what is this thing, these records?
So historically, when it began in the last decade of the 19th century, these were cylinder records, what they were called. But what I have been looking at, starting from 1902, which is the first commercial recording of music in India, we had what was a very, very crude kind of recording on wax cylinders, on wax, into the wax horn, essentially. So what really was happening here was that you had the big horn. I will play some images in a bit so that you also see what it was like. So the artist or the performer had to put her face into this horn and sing at a slightly higher pitch, because the horn was embedded with wax, and so this was what do you say? Layered with wax. So when she would sing, the sound would embed itself on this wax. And then this was, at least in the initial years when we didn't have our own production facility, this would go to other countries. Initially it was Hanover in Germany, where then the record was published. So it was also quite tricky to be able to do this, because it was very crude technology, and so very often they would have to sing in pitches higher than what they were trained in. And if you listen to the earlier recordings, they're also slightly faster. So this came out of the crudeness of the technology that one was dealing with at that time. So that's the period that I'm looking at. And then, of course, the microphone and all that happened in the 20s. Yeah. So.
No, that's great. I think this would be a wonderful chance, actually, given that we have the material, to give an example of what this is. Yeah.
Right. So the first diva of this phenomenon was a lady called Gauhar Jan. And I think it's important to know who Gauhar was, because, when the Gramophone and Typewriter Company Limited came to India from England, their job, the recording engineer's job, I think it's important for me to preface, the visual with this. Their job essentially was to set up a music market. And they were fairly clueless about what was happening, and of course completely clueless about Indian music. So they actually started looking for, they were doing a talent hunt. And so they started looking for performers who were already popular and came out of the mehfil or the salon tradition, because that's really what was happening then. And the one name that kept coming back to William Gaisberg, who was the first engineer who came from England who was given this task, was that of Gauhar Jan. And he says in his memoirs that Gauhar's was, Gauhar's was what Gauhar did, and her initial recordings really set the firm foundation for the industry in India. And she sang in more than 20 languages. And he also says that every time she came to record, she would stun us in a new gown. She also had a 6-horse carriage, which she would arrive in with great style to her shows. So this was the woman who really spearheaded the commercial recording scenario in India. Ian, can we have the video which has the audio first? So I'm going to play you a short clip of a video which is located, I mean, we didn't have moving images at that time, but this is located in a space where she performed in eastern India, in Kolkata, not this one, the other one, please, in Kolkata, where she performed. And what you will hear, which is quite uncomfortable, but it's Gauhar's voice. So.
My name is Sahajan Champion.
Could you pause it there, please? Thank you. So this is a badi, a zamindar's house in Kolkata. Zamindar, very landed, rich zamindar. And all the strange-looking men who appeared in the beginning of the video were really the guys who set up the All India Music Conference. So this was also the house in the music conference, of course, was set up in the 40s. But what I did want to draw your attention to was, I don't know if the announcement at the end of the recording was clear. Did you hear what she said? I'm asking you all. Well, this is Gauhar Jan would have been way too sedate for Gauhar. She says, Gauhar Jan champion. So, you know, that's what I meant when I said at the end of the recordings, they would, you know, there was another one where she very proudly announces her address, you know. And then, but then there were others who were quieter, who would just, you know, merely utter their names, Zohrabai Agrewali or something like that, you know, or they would have a British engineer announce their name, Achan Bai Ka Gana. It was actually said in Hindi, but it was announced by the recording engineer. So this was really, what can I say, an interesting time in how the market was beginning to take shape. And I keep saying market because in an absolutely irreversible way, it changed the way we listen to music. You know, the power that it suddenly gave to the listener, it shifted the whole idea of the dynamic between the listener and the performer. And that's why it's, and so it sets off a new idea of entertainment, a new idea of how we listen to music. And having said so, as a musician, that really interested me, actually, yeah. You know, when you read my introduction, you said writer and musician. I think I'll flip that. It's musician and writer. So.
No, I think it, and again, it just, we're saying the market, but then how all of this, we'll talk later a little bit, I hope, about the evolution into the film industry itself and the birth of the film industry in India. So, I mean, this is a rich territory. Something which, again, just here as we're listening and as I've been understanding more about this area, the limitation, one of the limitations, as I understand, is 3 minutes. That's about what the technology could do. So how do you view, when you think about this limitation, here we deal a lot in music with durational performance, then we'll get later into contemporary pop in a different kind of format, but how do you think the 3 minutes limited and empowered?
I think that's a fantastic question, actually. Because especially in the context of Indian music and some of the music that was being recorded, the very basis of that music is languor and improvisation. Yeah, so that's the very idea of, you know, take your time, spread yourself out, understand the melody, share it in this languorous, slow manner, and then you move into another speed, and then you finish off with, you know, vigor and energy. So that's the typical format of what we call the khayal. So now we had only 3 minutes to present all of this. And that's why also the women on record become important. Because they actually mastered or understood the requirements of technology and tied in all the critical elements of what goes into khayal or what goes into this improvisatory genre and brought it to the record in 3 minutes. And some of the women became particularly famous for doing that, for bringing improvisation into 3 minutes. And in this context, you know, the thing about women on record is that names are very important to me. You know, it may sound abstract sometimes if you've not heard the name or if you're unfamiliar with the name, but the whole idea is to give a name to the voice. And so in this particular context of improvising and to, you know, bringing the idea of the khayal into what could otherwise go on for 90 minutes to sort of tie it into 3 minutes was this woman called Zohrabai Agrewali. Zohrabai Agrewali has at least 200 recordings of khayals alone. And she has, of course, explored several rag or several melodies and brought these to the record. And what is of great significance is the sheer dexterity and skill with which she has brought all the elements, the critical elements of khayal gaiki into. If it's okay, I'll sing you a little Zohra Khayal.
That was going to be the next question, of course. And yes, please. You see this used a lot if you were here for the morning performance, an electric tumpara, which helps. So I think some of our audiences haven't understood what this simple device that we all carry on our iPads are.
A lot of us vocalists use something called the tanpura, which traditionally is a zither, basically. It's a long stem and a round bottom made of wood. And it has, so that the round bottom serves as the sound box. And it has 4 strings and 4 notes. So typically in Indian music, which does not have harmonies, you fix your scale. It's called the pitch. against which you sing. So each one of us will have our own scale. So I sing, for instance, either on G sharp or around there. So that G sharp will keep playing through my performance. It doesn't shift, it doesn't change. So the Tanpura is it's a very critical frame of reference, and I had better stick to that frame of reference, otherwise I will be murdered by all the purists in the audience. So, and it's usually difficult to...
I'm going to just put my timer on, the timer, to 3 minutes.
Oh God. I'm doing the languorous version. I'm doing the slow poke version. No. I'm not going to try and be Zora. So this is a rag called Purya, and the bandish is a prayer. It is an arzi or a request to a peer, to a spiritual mentor, Dastagir Peer, who's a very famous peer in northern India. Na na Araj suno dastagir peer muri, araj suno dastagir peer muri, आन खड़ी दायर बार तिहारे, अरज सुनो दस्तगीर पीर मुनि, सब पीरन के पीर तुम ही हो, सब पीरन के पीर तुम ही हो, आओ बढ़ाओ हमारी धीर तुम, अरज सुनो दस्तगीर पीर मोरे. My name is Vidya Shah. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I would love to ask a little bit. Earlier, you had sort of mentioned the privilege of being able to do this, and maybe as relates back about the emergence of the gramophone era, about the recording and social propriety across caste culture and the many Indias as these recordings were happening in every possible language and tradition.
See, there were two or three things happening in the context of the question that you raised. One is that the women who were recording, and let me just say that of course I sound like a feminist, but it's true that more women were recording than men. But it's not true that men were not recording at all. There were some men who were recording as well. But the fact is that, you know, the recording engineers felt that the female voice suited better for the technology. And so the couple of men who also became popular, like there was one called Pyara Sahib, there was another called Maujuddin Khan. It's interesting that in whatever has been written about them, they say that they became popular because they sounded like women. Okay, so and therefore these were a considered community of women who were already performers. They came from the courtesan tradition. They were born to the wives, several of them, and they were therefore very skilled, trained in not only singing, many of them were also good dancers. And so they transitioned in a very, in a seamless way into the business of music. a lot of the ustads or the male, sort of the tradition bearers of the kind of music that we practice were hesitant to record for two reasons again. One, it was scary to actually put your head into a machine because they didn't know what might be the consequences of it. And secondly, they felt it was beneath them to sell their music. Because, part of the oral tradition is just you hand, knowledge down through lineages. So a lot of these women, therefore, became, possible contenders for this new business that came in. So there were Muslim women, there were Hindu women, there were all kinds of women, but they were essentially called bygone. And this is a term that, from being called tawaifs, which has a lot more baggage, which is a much more judgmental sort of a title, from being called tawaifs, they decided to call themselves bygones, or the singing ladies. Yeah? So that is the transition that we're looking at. And the other thing that happened was there was a certain kind of a democratization of the listening space. More people started listening, suddenly realized that they could listen to this music. So in fact, initially when the gramophone happened, and not only in India, even in America, there was a lot of resistance. There was actually a stigma to say that, is it okay to listen to music by yourself from a machine? So this was happening in India as well. But gradually, when the gramophone became like this, it became a kind of a curious object, which people wanted to discover, which people wanted to relate with, understand. And so they would even have gramophone soirees around, say, a belgadi or a bullock cart in street corners in villages. So that's how gradually it became a thing of everyday existence. And so there were jokes, there were riddles that were constructed around. I'll share a riddle in Hindi with you. And I will do a bad translation in English later, but I will anyways try. So it said, roti ek lagati chakkar. Roti, I think we all know, the Indian bread, the round one, right? Roti ek lagati chakkar. Us par rakha bhala. So there is this one roti which is doing the rounds, and on that roti we put a bhala. A bhala is a needle. Jhoom jhoom dayan sur mein gati. Jhoom jhoom as in there is this witch who's swinging away and singing a song. Jhoom jhoom dayan sur mein gati. Roti ka hai muh kala. The face of this roti is black. So this was a riddle. So the idea was, okay, so there is this black roti which is swinging around, singing a song on which you place a needle. Okay, come on, guess what is it? That's basically what the riddle was. And of course, the answer was record. So there was all these kind of little fun things, anecdotes, stories, jokes. There were many poets who were very distressed about having to listen off a machine. So then they would sort of let off what we call shairi, or some fairly sort of sad Urdu poetry complaining about the fact that they have to listen to music on a record. So all kinds of interesting social changes were taking place. Can I just play another video?
Please, please.
And I'm going to sing you a song while you watch that video. The video, Ian, you're going to have to play that one which says short video or something like that. The one which doesn't have audio. So this is a video which has advertisements, of how the machine was played up in North India, South India, what were people saying about it. And what I will share with you is like an everyday song which people started, just for fun. They would sing at home. It was not classical. It was not popular. It was just fun. So... So these are also many Indian languages. As you go along, some of you might... पहने कुर्ता पर पतलून आधा फागुन आधा जून पहने कुर्ता पर पतलून आधा फागुन आधा जून बाबा पूर्वी धुन में गाए बाबा पूर्वी धुन में गाए, बेटा फिल्मी गीत सुनाए। बाबा पूर्वी धुन में गाए, बेटा फिल्मी गीत सुनाए। घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन, आधा फागुन आधा जून। घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन, आधा फागुन आधा जून। बेटा सूखी रोटी खाए, हाँ बेटा सूखी रोटी खाए, अम्मा अंडा दूध उड़ाए। बेटा सूखी रोटी खाए, अम्मा अंडा दूध उड़ाए। भैया खाए आलू भून, घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन। भैया खाए आलू भून, घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन। पहरे कुर्ता पर पतलून, आधा फागुन आधा जून। बाबा पूर्वी धुन में गाए, बेटा फिल्मी गीत सुनाए। बाबा पूर्वी धुन में गाए, बेटा फिल्मी गीत सुनाए। अम्मा खाए आलू भून, घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन। अम्मा खाए आलू भून, घर में बाजे ग्रामोफोन। Can we pause it, please? So basically, this is like a folk song which says, you know, I'm wearing a trouser and a kurta, and you know, we're just having fun with the gramophone playing at home. So it's a silly song, but basically, what I'm trying to say is, it became a part of everyday existence, and in a very quick time. You know, by 1915, this was an industry to contend with, because between 1908 and 1915, there were what were called the gramophone tours, where they set up, you know, temporary studio spaces in various parts of North as well as South India. And so these recordings were done in hotel rooms, in tents, all kinds of places, but that was enough to get it going. And that was the emergence of many divas.
Yeah, and reaching into the villages, which is critical when we think about the totality of India and urban versus rural population, that this was one of the first access points. Today we can say the Bollywood films we can actually in a village see these, but this was one of the first mass culture experiences.
Absolutely. So there was not just you know, classical music or semi-classical music. There was all kinds of music that was being produced. Popular music. I mean, let's not just. I mean, we don't have to kid ourselves saying that, oh, it was all like, you know, great stuff then and it's all gone now. No, there was a lot of stuff which was just for fun. And you know, you must remember that because we had the British then, there was also an attempt to you know, engage them or attract them. So there were some songs by women who became popular where they would throw in English words into the song. You know, like there's this one which says, "Darling, tum ban gaye gentleman." So, you know, there were songs like that as well, which, of course, sold very well, you know. And there were some who became stars. Of course, there was the Gohar Jans and the Janki Bais, but then there was also another category of the ones who became popular with the English, which went with the title of Miss, you know. So those, you could even see some ads in English newspapers. There's this really lovely ad for a woman called Dulari, who was Miss Dulari, and clearly she was a popular singer, and she would sing, you know, these breezy Savan ke Geet and, you know, just popular songs. And come listen to Dulari. Come listen to Dulari. Miss not this golden opportunity. The ad said, this is 1913. Miss not the golden opportunity. Lucky he who hastens to listen to Dulari. Unlucky he who sits at home with his wife. Right? So there was all kind of luring that was happening, and clearly this was an exciting time. And even a lot of the women travelers from England have some very interesting observations of just the physical appearances of these women, you know. How can you wear a petticoat and dance? You know, because it's not actually a petticoat. Monica would know, you know, the kind of elaborate kurta that you wear for a dance. So there's a lot of interesting commentary as well, yeah.
I'm so enjoying this. A couple questions which maybe loop around each other. So here we're coming to the end of the colonial period, the beginnings of different strains of nationalism. And in the midst of all that, why is this story really marginalized? I'm going to guess that most people came in this morning and haven't really thought about the Bajis or the Gramophone Women. Why the marginalization of why is this not standard course material when someone is studying music, Indian or South Asian music?
Maybe it's just a case of not having good enough taste. I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. No, I think there were 2 or 3 very important things happening historically, politically, socially at that time. We're looking essentially at late 19th century, early 20th century, when there was a serious build-up to the nationalist movement. There was also already a lot of resistance to, the fact that a lot of these performers or the torchbearers of this kind of traditional music came from certain kinds of communities. And I don't mean the women, I mean the Muslim ustads also. There was a resistance to the fact that how can they be, the sole proprietors of this rich world of culture. And so it erupted in many ways. So there was, for instance, a very, very noted ethnomusicologist who is actually the father of documentation of, typically North Indian classical music is hard to document because it's an improvisatory genre. You don't write the music. But he was one of the first people who compiled it into 5 volumes of just compositions, of bandishes, Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande. And there are even questions about whether the bandishes were accurately notated or whether there was any editing with the words. So there was all of this that was happening, In addition to which, there, like I said, because of the nationalist movement, the record became an important tool to convey messages, to convey ideas of nationalism, of what it should be, of what it should not be. There was a whole wave of what we call bhakti nationalism, the Hindu assertion of nationalism, which was very evident on the record. You have many stars, men in the 30s and the 40s who had taken to using the record as an important vehicle. But having said so, the women on the record also played a very, very noticeable role in the nationalist movement. There was a very, very famous singer called Siddheshwari Devi. She came from a town called Banaras, which is in North India, and some of you may know it's one of those sacred cities by the river Ganga. So Siddheshwari came from Banaras, and she was a singer par excellence. She sang the semi-classical genres of Thumri and Dadra, which are typically, which one just lackadaisically refers to as love songs, but it's actually quite complex kind of singing. So Siddheshwari was a master of this kind of singing, has many records to her credit. So she apparently would get up at the end of every swarry and sing Vande Mataram. Vande Mataram is the ultimate patriotic song. Vande Mataram, I pray to my mother, who in this case is my country. So she would stand up and sing this at the end of, and then there were other people, very famous, Mogubai, who has sung these kinds of nationalist songs, patriotic songs on the record. And there were labels, Young India label, there were all these labels which also published this kind of music. So, and women also monetarily contributed to several parties which existed at that time. Goharjan, in fact, there's this famous incident where she was supporting the Congress, the Indian National Congress at that time, and there was one event where she was supposed to sing, and she had committed some money to the Congress, and had the understanding was that Gandhiji would come to this event. And for some reason, he didn't show up. And Gohar, being Gohar, was very offended that, if I can make the time and if I am coming to sing, why didn't you show up? So she says, okay, if you can't make time, I can only make this much money for you. So she apparently, cut it by half or whatever it was. So they had their ways. And then there was Jaddan Bai, who supported the progressive writers. So all kinds of help was being extended by women who had accumulated enough, resources.
Yeah. And I, again, as more and more people become aware, again, of these contributions, I think we're all very grateful about the book that you've created now, the sort of transitioning from websites and archives, and we actually have some documentation. It's a couple more questions before we would open to general questions, but coming back into, and not to harp too hard on it, about women, what does it tell us, or this era tell us about empowerment? So if young women and women were taking sort of the initiative, willing to take the risk to go onto the recordings, what does it tell us about empowerment? Like I would say earlier this morning, again, those who might have been here, I think Amrit was performing again this morning. What does it tell us about empowerment of young women in India, and perhaps on a more global scale? And what do we learn through time and projecting into the future?
I think the gramophone phenomenon itself is one of a bit of an irony. So it empowered the Baijis to the extent that it gave them more visibility and perhaps money. Several of them, became, I can't say several, but at least some of them became quite reasonably well off. But then there was a difficult flip side to it, which is that what the gramophone did when it came was it offered an anonymity. It offered a space where you did not have to be seen to perform or to listen. So the fact that you did not have to be seen meant that it paved the way for, quote unquote, other women to feel respectable, to feel that this is a space that they can access. This is a space that they can also, pursue. In the process, there has been this, coupled with the whole nationalist, sort of the social stigma that the nationalist movement also continued to throw at some of these women. Together, I think it did marginalize the community a fair bit, while paving the way for what we just said, respectable men and women. And this also happened in cinema. The talkies came to India in the 30s when sound came to music, and again it became a popular industry very soon. A lot of the women who were singing on the records came into the film industry as well. They became the first music director is supposed to have been a woman, Saraswati Devi, who did some really hit movies in the 30s, Jawani Ki Hawa, and a lot of, and she's also supposed to have introduced playback in Indian cinema. Jadanbai, again, the one I mentioned earlier, she had a production house. So many women were doing well in the talkies as well. But then there were the women who came from respectable, upper caste, married kind of backgrounds. In the 40s, shift where these women have come into the fold and are gradually pushing out a lot of the other women. So yes, there was a process of empowerment that was set off, but I think maybe some were being disempowered in the process.
I'm just internalizing, and no, but it's a great explanation. I have just a confluence maybe of two questions before we open to general questions. And as you just started talking about the transition, the birth of the film industry, particularly the talkies, and touching a little more on the commercial aspect, where we started in the beginning, that this also was a business. We could argue it was a colonial business imposed by Europeans. There's a lot of ways we can view it. But finally, where that leads us now with pop music, popular music in India, nationally and regionally, and potentially how indebted that music is to where we're starting here with with these women and this passion of yours. I know that's a lot of parts to the question, but thanks.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's true. We live in the era of iTunes and SoundCloud and whatever else that's happening these days. And you can see that within 100 years, music is much older, but within 100 years, there's been such rapid transitions in technology itself, you know, from the 78, then you have the EPs, LPs, cassettes, CDs, and now nobody's listening to anything except online. I mean, largely off your computers, or, you know, you're getting onto some site or the other and listening to music. So it's been a very rapid process in which these changes have taken place. And so has been the case with India. But there are some things that continue to remain. For instance, I was sharing yesterday as well, I think that the 3.5 format is also what instated the length of a film song, for instance. You know, you don't have film songs which are over 4 minutes, maybe.
Very formulaic in the film industry about
so
exactly.
that formula in some ways remains, although we can listen to music for much longer than the 3-minute format. So there are some templates which have remained. Voice, for instance, voice quality, how it has, the female voice, how it has evolved over this period of time, and whether, you know, different kinds of voices have come and gone. But you know what I feel has happened, particularly in the commercial scenario, is that there has been a slight shift in the idea of the soloist. You see, we are essentially a soloist tradition, whether it's, of course, in classical music, very much, yes. You know, I sing on stage and I have accompanist. It's not an ensemble. But if you listen to a lot of the film music now, it's very hard to find one clear voice. You know? You will see that it's mixed up with a lot of voices. So there have been these shifts, and I think the industry, sometimes I feel, I may be wrong, this is a completely personal feeling. Sometimes I feel that the industry is becoming, the commercial industry is becoming bigger than the art space itself. And that, in some ways, to me, is a bit of a risk, because then it starts defining what the aesthetic should be.
Right. And I think that's what, if I would say, at the front end of the cinema at FTII, where we're really moving away from the Bollywood models into the independent cinema, and the influence is coming back. And primarily, that has to do with duration, you know, and attention span. So, thank you for answering my ridiculous questions, but a couple options we have with our remaining about 10 minutes is, of course, we'd like to receive some questions from the audience, and also perhaps have the opportunity for Vidya to sing one more little bit. But questions first. I think my first hand was there. The question was about examples of songs that influenced the nationalist movement.
You mean what the women sang or what the men sang? The women sang, yeah. I could sing you what was a popular patriotic song at that time, the melody of which has now completely changed, but when it was sung then, it was sung like this. And again, like I said, it was that famous song called Vande Mataram, and it's a very popular song even today in India. And it was sung in the late 30s by a very famous singer called Mogubai, just for your reference, and she published this on a record. She sang this for a record. Vande Sujala So, Vande Mataram, I pray to this mother, who's my country, and then it goes on to describe her beauty. It's in Sanskrit. Jaya Vande, may you be victorious, my dear Vande Mataram. Thank you.
One there, then one there.
I wanted to ask about the early music. Was it devotional? Was it poetry? And then when it shifted to the love songs, to Bollywood, my impression has always been the classical singer's voice changed to this kind of coquettish woman. Is that true?
Did everyone hear the question?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're talking about the evolution of the voice in the singer coming from this period into the period we're talking about into the present, and perhaps a tendency towards more coquettishness in the voice. The one thing I'd want to add to the question is that within the Indian traditional music, we're tracing actually back into the Sanskrit 1000. It's a very, very long history, which might just help in answering it.
I mean, he paraphrased the question so beautifully that I feel like you have an answer for it. Maybe.
No.
No. In the beginning of the recording, there were all kinds of genres. So there are some which we don't even hear anymore. So, and a lot of the women were singing what are typically identified as male genres as well. And at that point, performance was not seen in such a modular way as it is seen now. So when I say that, what I mean is that if I'm a classical musician, then I have to have a certain kind of a voice which will not be appealing in film. This kind of disaggregation was not there at that time. It was not modular. They were allowed to be versatile. They were allowed to improvise across genres, across languages. They were also allowed to lean into other traditions, which is also now considered, which is largely disallowed now. So there was a lot of borrowing and mixing up. And I think somewhere along the line, because in the 40s and 50s, a certain kind of a voice became the female voice. And ever since that happened, that became like a template for, okay, if you have to be a woman playback singer or a popular performer, then this is the voice quality that will be acceptable. It became like a template. Having said so, I have to say now that we have such an enormous industry, a film industry, the many different kinds of textures are coming back. You'll listen to very many different kinds of voices, which is, I think, a very heartening transition to have happened. I hope that answers you.
And I think fascinating also in the film industry is that it isn't just the Bollywood film industry. We have the Marathi film industry, we have the Bengali film industry. We just have myriad film industries going on simultaneously, which are creating different linguistically, culturally, and traditionally inspired musics that are going on. Please, one final question, yes?
Well, these are not really questions, but a kind of observation. First of all, I'm from Uttar Pradesh, and it is such a pleasure to hear songs in the Hindustani that I speak. Thank you. And the second thing I was remembering was I'm from the Kais community, and the women often sing. But my aunt, my mommy, in the 1940s, went beyond singing in the family to singing on All India Radio. And she was supported by her parents and her family. But it was considered a really out there kind of thing to do, because respectable women didn't really do that.
I just want to... I'm glad you brought that point up, because the All India Radio was the the state-run institution which suddenly created this possibility of recording, and it was public broadcast for the first time. And when it happened in the 40s, there were all kinds of people and ustads who started to record in the radio station, as it was called. And gradually in the 50s, I read somewhere, and I'm still looking for a source and hoping that I read, it was an incorrect piece of information, because I was given to understand that somewhere in the 50s they suddenly laid down a criterion. I know there was a committee in the 50s in India which set up certain stringent rules. They set up a rule to say that only married women can record. See? So
They
But
would affix amateur to their name.
correct.
Amateur, the word amateur as opposed
They
to
were
professional.
not professional.
Exactly, yeah. So that was still allowed. But if you were a bi or a jan, then I'm sorry, go home, get married, and come back. Which was, of course, not a very.
And there was one last thing I wanted to say about the Hindi film music. In popular movies now, you sometimes have songs that are sung in a different voice. And they are some somewhat risque songs. But they are, I think, in our common tradition. Like even a song like Munni Badnaam. This is very much, it sounds like a folk song really, and it's sung in a Dehati voice. So
I think the idea of risque has also gone through a real transformation. What was risque at one point where it was only limited to mehfils where women were not allowed to be part of these musical gatherings. Now you happily sit in a multiplex holding hands with your partner and watch what is called an item song. So that's a social transformation that has...
Yeah, huge social transformation in what's acceptable on screen. I mean, from what would once be called a blue film to now is the mainstream and well beyond. I mean, it's absolutely, even my sensitivities sometimes, I don't know. We're with about, we're really at close, but I just can't imagine closing the session without one more. Of anything that you feel impassioned.
Well, I'll have to close with a tribute to one of the Baijis. This is a song by a woman who became very popular in the 1920s. And I really respect her because she's the one who put in the idea of arm twisting and negotiating with labels. I love her for it. The fact that she could do it in the 20s is quite radical, I think. Her name was Janki Bai Chappan Churi. For some of you who may understand, Chappan Churi basically means 56 knives. So she's acquired this title. I mean, there are many stories, and I think I'll just have to come back to Boulder and do another session on why these names and titles. But this is a love song by Janki Bai. She used to write her songs, and her collection of songs is in a book called Diwani Janki. And as I sing it, you will see that I refer to her, the nom de plume occurs in the course of the song. And it's a beautiful love song which says, it's a seductive song. It says, Rasili tori akhiyan, your eyes, your amorous eyes. Rasili tori akhiyan, jiya lalchaye, my heart is melting. So this is in a rag which is Bhairavi, which is typically sung at the end of a concert. So.
Jaan
Thank you all so very much. Enjoy the rest of your... Oh, yes, of course. I want to show you again.
This is... the title of the book is Jalsa. And it's the journey of the Indian women from the salon to the studio. So it goes from the gramophone era to theatre to talkies. And please do pick up a copy online. I'm afraid it's stuck in some warehouse. It didn't make it here.
It's published in the U.S. by Columbia University Press.
Yes.
So we should find availability. Again, try through your independent bookstores. Okay.
Thank you so much, Vidya.